Welcome to the Superabound Podcast, where vision-led entrepreneurs learn to build a generous business without sacrificing what matters most. You are listening to episode 359, The Power of an Emotional Sabbatical. Hello and welcome. I am very happy to be here today, to be back. I just came home from a 10-day adventure in Scotland with my family, with Steve and my kids. And it was just so much fun. We had a really great time. I am slowly sharing some of my favorite parts about the trip in case you ever go to Scotland. I was really overwhelmed planning this trip because there was just so many things to do. I got so many different recommendations, and we were there for 10 days. We traveled around to a few different locations, missed so many things, I'm sure, but just a beautiful space with amazing people. And I just feel like I want to pay it forward a little bit by sharing the recommendations that I have, because it was a tricky adventure to plan with there just being so many things to do. And, for people with sometimes different interests, we all like different things. So if you're interested or you're planning a trip to Scotland, I am sharing a lot of stories, and I'm sharing in my highlights some of my favorite places for food, for some shopping, some shops like bookstore that I loved and a knitting store that I loved, hikes that we did, and even a couple places that we stayed, which I don't normally do. I'm not a travel influencer person, but I think that when you find something amazing, or when, a place that you're staying does an incredible job, I think we're living in a world where that deserves to be celebrated, because I only ever really hear about the complaints and the bad things from other people, unless I ask for, favorites. So I'll be sharing that in case you're curious, or just want to see. My kids took a million pictures of themselves. Well, we took the pictures, but they were like, we're going to jump. So I have them jumping on mountains and different things. And so you can check out. They had a great time, and so did we. So that is over at besuperabound.com, it's on Instagram, at besuperabound. And I'll be sharing some of the things I loved. I still have a little bit of jet lag, as maybe you can tell. I'm drinking some coffee. I've been getting up at like 4 a.m., totally awake since we got back. So we're going to do our best today. But I think it's a topic that is suited to how I'm feeling, and hopefully will be very helpful to all of you. So we're talking today about this idea that I had kind of at the beginning of the year. And if you listen to the podcast that I share with Elena called The Coaching Mixer, I talked a little bit about this idea, but it's something I have found it immensely beneficial as a business owner, but I think every person in a leadership role could also benefit from this. It's this idea of taking an emotional sabbatical. And I was very inspired this year because I had several of my clients across different industries decide to give themselves sabbaticals. Some were as short as 3 months. Some were as long as a full year. And so I've been coaching a lot of people around the idea of stepping out of their pretty hectic workflow and taking deeper rest, doing sometimes more focused, meaningful, visionary type work. And just the question, maybe the spiritual question of identity, when we take away some of our more recognizable categories, when we are not being seen through the eyes of our work. We are not being interacted with as our job title or as our accolades or any of that. That can be very jarring for many people. I think probably for everyone. Even though the idea of a sabbatical is really lovely. I've known people who've taken sabbaticals and they have moved to another country that with a language they don't speak, and they have written a book, or they have just had a vacation. They've caught up on quality time with people they haven't connected with. They have started projects or hobbies that they've always really wanted to dive into, but never had the time or space for. So that's kind of a traditional sabbatical. It is a break from the routine, the work routine in some way. It doesn't mean that you check out of the world completely, but for some people, it can mean like a deeper retreat into a different area of life. What I started to do at the beginning of this year, beginning of 2026, was explore the idea of what it would mean to take an emotional sabbatical, meaning I would continue doing my work in the world. I would continue showing up for things like this podcast, for the book that I'm writing, for various, going through the work and the calendar every week. But emotionally, I was taking a break from being intensely focused on any particular outcome in my business, meaning not worrying about the revenue for a full year. This is my sabbatical is a year. Not worrying about pushing for brand new initiatives, not really worrying about innovating, basically taking an emotional break from being the generator of all things in my business. And as I've talked about before, this has kind of happened in conjunction with Steve taking on a bigger role with one of the companies that he was coaching and consulting for. He's almost totally full-time in that other business. And of course, he's still involved as a co-founder of Superabound. He still does a lot of the work that I am not a genius at. He still, takes care of a lot of the things within Superabound. But really having him step into another chapter in his involvement with Superabound and his work in general, it gave me a moment to think, I suddenly don't have to do things the way I've always done them. I suddenly don't have to co-create my next step towards the big vision of what Steve and I both really believe in and want to see happen in the world. But I don't really have to do that with his consideration as much anymore. Not that that was ever bad. I really lean on Steve for a lot of the things that I create. And he is very much my coach within the company. But suddenly not having that other person, that other core person, and this might be similar to you if you have had maybe you've always worked with the same COO, or you had a core team member in your business that has moved on to other things, where suddenly you have to come back and say, I was probably doing things to please other people. Not that that's a bad thing, but I was probably making decisions that I knew my team could be on board with. And suddenly when it is me and some contractors, or me and someone else who's kind of consulting more or coaching more in my company and doesn't have to be, on board and rah with everything I do, there is a different kind of opportunity that arrives for you. And this is what happens on a more traditional sabbatical. Suddenly, you're not expected to answer all of the emails from all of the colleagues. You're not expected to produce or achieve certain lanterns, light certain lanterns that maybe the company you work for really cares about, but it's not like the passion in your heart. So I was kind of having this moment where I thought, okay, I can go in two directions. I can spiral. I can say, oh no, I am doing this all mostly alone again. This is going to be very hard. I don't even know what I want or who I am. I could have had a whole crisis about it. And I think there was probably times where I did. But then there was this other piece of me that said, Steve is still very involved. He is still my business partner and my husband. He's not going anywhere as far as I know. The thing I want to do is still very true for me. I care very deeply about making sure business owners, leaders, are not chasing some external measure of success at the expense of their own well-being and their own joy. And as I was thinking this through, I started writing my next book that's all about a return on joy. But it really occurred to me that I could create tools around this. I could talk about experiences I've had coaching clients about this, but it would probably be more authentic and more in integrity for me to actually pursue a return on joy in my own life as my full-time job. Like, that's the best way to write about something, is to give yourself over to that experience. And what that took was deciding I'm going to take an emotional sabbatical for a year. It doesn't mean I don't care about the outcomes of the experiments I run or how my programs do. It doesn't mean I don't look at my bank account for the business, all of that. It means that I made sure that I had enough money in the bank to only do the things in my business that I felt really strongly compelled to do. And there's a reason, because I've watched a lot of people. This is not meant to be a criticism, but it might sound like one. So I just apologize ahead of time. I've watched a lot of people, solo entrepreneurs, have a really interesting idea about the niche they want to create, the people they want to serve. And they think, ooh, I believe I am meant to work with women who are retiring and want to make their retirement amazing. Or I want to work with people who are interested in going from, I don't know, a corporate job into becoming a tech founder. And they will think, okay, this is what I meant to do. This is my calling. And then they'll put all of their marketing and they'll tell their story in a way that's all about them. They'll talk about how they felt inspired to work with these particular people. They'll talk about how this is their big calling. And sometimes I read the copy that people write, because I teach relationship-based marketing. So I'm always interested in like how we do this. And I think it's a really tricky thing to tell your story in a way that is relevant to your clients, to your ideal customers, but not make them a character in your story. not say like, you're helping me fulfill my dreams by becoming my client, because no one cares and they don't want to do that. People, especially, I'll talk about coaching specifically here, because I think coaches are probably the most guilty of people who do this. Nobody wants to be your client so that you can live your dreams. I want to hear how you're living your dreams if you are a coach, because to me, it means that you have the type of mindset that is so expansive that you have stepped out of the flow of what society expected, and you've created something that is wholeheartedly you. I want to see that, because your mindset and your tools are going to be the thing you use to coach me. But I don't want to be a cog in your marketing wheel. I don't want to be, I don't want to feel like I'm doing you a favor by paying you to coach me. And so I didn't talk about my emotional sabbatical because I really wanted to avoid it sounding like that. And because honestly, I was not sure that it would work as a business move. Because I think sometimes when people take their focus away from those external markers like revenue, like re-signing clients or repeat customers or new customers, I think sometimes when we take our focus away from the metrics and say, oh, it doesn't really matter, if I build it, they will come. That is from a movie about ghosts playing baseball. That is not a business strategy. And so I've tried to be really thoughtful about how I share about the emotional sabbatical, because I'm talking about it a lot right now, because I don't want people to think that the emotional sabbatical is a growth strategy. Your emotional sabbatical is something that you might choose to do for yourself. I'm not even suggesting you choose to do it, but it's something I chose to do for myself, because it's really important for me to be writing about getting a return on joy from my business while I'm experiencing a return on joy that my business has helped me catalyze. So the very first thing that I did was make sure that I really did not need to make a penny this year, because the only way for me to take an emotional sabbatical is to not feel like there's scarcity in the business. And this is why I'm saying, I'm not suggesting everyone try this. I'm not like, let's hear about you should just do this next month. No, I don't think so, because I know that many businesses cannot actually afford to do that. This I was doing as an experiment, or as my own personal exploration. And I want to share a couple of the things that I've learned so far, because we're into the summer. I have more time left to do this and really drop in. But I will say that the first couple of months of trying not to step into my regular, okay, what are we creating? What is new? What is the next thing? How are we, making revenue metrics markers, blah, blah, blah. That was really hard. And I think it probably took me, if I'm really honest, it probably took me 5 months before I was really catching myself going down that road and saying, oh, but this is actually kind of like a year off, where you are going to serve your clients. You're going to, share what you want to share as marketing. You're going to do your podcast as you feel like doing it. And really not have an emotional attachment to outcomes. It took a long time. It took a lot of coaching. I worked with my own coach who is actually also taking a real sabbatical, like not real, a traditional, I guess. Mine is real too. It's just different. A traditional sabbatical right now, and taking several months off of work completely, pausing her business and letting her team look after most of it. But it was hard to uncouple from that, because of how much identity and is wrapped up, I think, in what we create. It feels very good to have someone come into your business, read your book, listen to your podcast, feel a connection with you to such a degree that they are trusting you with their time, their money, their mind, their heart, their business, the intimate things of their life for you to be their coach. And for me to say, I am not actively in pursuit of new clients, more clients. I'll share when I have a spot opening. I'll share opportunities to work with me in ways that feel very good, that don't feel pressure fueled. I don't ever want someone to come into my business feeling like I need them as a client. I don't want to feel like that. And I never want to give someone the impression that like, I desperately need this person to be my client. There are people who I've met who I would be very excited to work with. And I've told them that, like, I think I could really do some incredible things with you. And I would love to work with you. But I always want that to come from a generous place where they feel ready. They want that kind of support of coaching and thinking partnership. And it doesn't feel like me, working for them to pull them into my world, but instead is something where I'm going to help them and step into their world and be a piece of the puzzle that maybe was missing. I always wanted to feel like that. And I will say the power of the emotional sabbatical is the people I've met where that has happened very organically have been very fun people to work with. And I realized that I probably could have been creating more of these relationships with my relationship-based marketing tools that, that I teach all the time, coming from this different energy. The next piece of the power of an emotional sabbatical for myself actually really surprised me. And I've heard this experience from other people who've done sabbaticals, more traditional sabbaticals, is very unexpected things have moved into the space where the overthinking, overworking, worry, stress, overwhelm, confusion used to live. So when you take a year or whatever amount of time to say, I'm giving myself this gift. I've had a business for many, many years. This is the year I'm giving myself the gift of not intentionally not trying to turn the wheel to do business in the same way I've been doing it. It creates a lot of space. And that space for many people does not sit empty for long. In my case, I was taking this time and I had seen a neighbor of mine is an artist and was sharing some pictures from this pastel class that she took. And I reached out to her and she encouraged me to sign up for it. And I started doing pastels once a week for a couple of hours, going to a class in person, learning from a really cool teacher, having a lot of fun in this room with people who were very serious artists. I feel like they probably shouldn't have let me in, but they were all really supportive, really neat. And some of them were very stressed out about how good their work was. I mean, I was just happy to be there and probably happy for my growth mindset because I was just having such a blast creating, I don't know what we would call it, art at first. But I was having so much fun exploring this new medium and these tools that I had no idea existed. And some of them were like very frustrated with their work that I would say was quite beautiful. But over a really short period of time, this idea that had been nudging at me for a number of years started to come in, where I've always wanted to create an oracle deck. And if you're not familiar with what that is, it's like tarot cards, but instead of following the classical tarot formula, it is totally based on the artist's intuitive or contacted work. And these images kept coming to me, and I was like, I don't think I can draw all of these things, but I can make a go of it with this beautiful tool that I've just started to learn. And I've created now, the deck is complete. I spent many work days, quote unquote, creating cards. I have a unique way that I'm going to be offering the guidebook so that people can really interact with the cards, not just for readings, but also for their own deeper coaching or journaling practice, whatever floats your boat. These cards are being made. And that was a totally unexpected side effect from the emotional sabbatical, because I wanted something that was going to create a return on joy, which meant I was suddenly open to experimenting with things that I have never thought to try. I was open to expanding my mind around what I thought was possible for myself. And it has been one of the most surprising, very fun things I've ever done. And now I'm going to finally have an oracle deck to share with people, to do readings with for my coaching clients. It feels really, really good. But knowing that that didn't come from sitting down at the beginning of the year and saying, okay, in Q3 and 4, I have to release a new product. I must think of something really interesting that's going to grab people's attention. Like, there was none of that. It was just kind of like, one day I said to Steve, I think I'm creating an oracle deck. Like, I have a couple of these images that are straight out of the Superabound book. I was also working on my next book, and some images came up, and I was like, this finally helps me articulate a concept and a tool that I've been using for a few years, but I just couldn't I couldn't really get the language around that until I drew this image, and the image explained the whole thing to me. So it's been it's been a wild spiritual adventure. I have had nights where I've woken up in the middle of the night with this image and a very clear message, like, this is the card for this particular tool. I have started drawing something where I thought, oh, this is going to be, a drop, a stone in the pond, like a ripple effect. And we're going to talk about ripple results. And it became something that honestly looks to most of us like a hurricane in the middle of the ocean. So I am learning in this very collaborative process that I'm in with the universe right now, all about the power of taking kind of a scary step into giving myself a lot of emotional space. And I honestly, here's the thing I will say that, you might want to consider, especially if you are in a difficult period of time in your business right now. It might not make sense for you to take a full year of a full emotional sabbatical where you just say, I'm not going to care about outcomes. I'm going to just focus on what brings me joy. That is kind of more like, that's all about us if we do that as business owners. It's because our revenue does dictate how people are receiving it, how people are receiving our work in the world. But in a really difficult time, you might notice yourself working in your mind when you're not at your desk. And I'm not going to pretend that this is easy, what I'm about to say. But you might decide at 5 o'clock, I'm giving myself an 8 hour, 10 hour, 12 hour, 14 hour, ideally, emotional sabbatical. I am going to redirect my mind intentionally and lovingly every time I catch myself in kind of the spin out or in the static around what should I do to solve this problem. Focusing sometimes really hard on a problem doesn't often bring us like the most creative solutions. And you can test this for yourself. I'm not going to tell you how it is for you, but maybe you've ever noticed that you're grappling with something, you fall asleep, and then you wake up in the morning and the solution is there. It's not because the solution just magically appeared. It's usually because I think it happens this way because you're finally relaxed enough to hear yourself think, your body is not in this gripping position where nothing can get through. You're finally physically, emotionally, and spiritually a little more open. And, a lot of people tell me that they have these moments either when they're right before they fall asleep or right before they wake up in the morning. Is this kind of liminal space is where we get a lot of answers. And I've played around with meditations in that liminal time for many years. It's where some of my best ideas come from. Could be on a massage table and kind of like in that half sleepy state. And suddenly the next thing to do comes in very clearly. It's possible to do that without being on an emotional sabbatical. But some of us, myself included, need a break from being the constant generator in ways that are not as organic as kind of just letting it unfold. So I realize I'm kind of sharing maybe a more spiritual approach. I'm not saying this is the path to growth for your business. I'm saying actually kind of the opposite. But interestingly, my business is doing very well. So I think there is, when you are trading your time and your energy, as it's your time or your energy is the product that you are selling, taking impeccable care of that time and energy and being somebody a little different than most people are used to. I think that helps you stand out. I think it's good for marketing. People are following along with my pictures from Scotland more than most other things I post. It could be that my kids are really cute and they're jumping in the air and they're all soaking wet. That could be it. But I think it shows that here's a coach who's putting their money where their mouth is. I'm not working every day in the summer. I am going on adventures. And my adventures at this point in my life do not need to be laying comatose on a beach. I don't need that kind of a recharge because my life is surrounded with self-investment. I'm self-investing every single day. Before I recorded this podcast, I have done my workout, I've done my meditation, I have done my card reading. I haven't done that yet, actually. I'm going to do that after this. But my whole day is scheduled around these types of supportive things so that I don't have to make myself the center of the universe in my business. I can actually focus completely on my clients and what they need, and I can hear them more deeply, and they can get what they need from the container I'm creating for them. And that is really unique. And that is something special that the emotional sabbatical has maybe taught me on a deeper level, that you can't fake having present energy. You can't really fake presence. And if you need presence to do your work, this could be something to play with, maybe for 8 hours at the end of the day. Don't let yourself fall into the worry and the spinning. Use the heal static technique from my book, Superabound, Live the Life the Universe is Dreaming for You. It's right behind me. Steve has a whole meditation for this process when you get the book bonuses. It's important. And I think that if more people played with their version of this, not as a growth strategy, but as self-investment, it could be a new way of working and being for you. And I would love to hear what you think. Does this sound wild to you? Does it sound insane? I want to hear about it. And if you're thinking about doing an emotional sabbatical, I can share a little more specifically about how I set it up, what my sort of boundaries and guidelines have been. You can also listen to the episode of the Coaching Mixer where Elena and I talk about it a little bit from the context of being a coach. And I'm really happy to hear what questions you have. You can reach out to me at hello@besuperabound.com. And I will talk to you again soon.